We've spent a lot of time talking about the Nik collection and all of the wonderful things that those apps do, but there is one thing that they don't do, and that is convert RAW files and get them ready for editing. DxO PureRAW is a separate application. It's not part of the Nik collection, but you'll want it in your workflow. So what does PureRAW do? Well, it does three things. It reduces noise using artificial intelligence in the most amazing way. It also removes any kind of optical problems with your lens, distortion, chromatic aberration, things like that. And it also sharpens your image and gets it ready for editing. PureRAW can be used as a standalone application or as a plug-in to Lightroom Classic, and I'm going to show you both workflows and you can decide which one is best for you. When you process a RAW file, PureRAW is going to output that in one of three ways. Either a JPEG image that's ready to go, you can post that, send it to friends, email it, it's ready. As a TIFF file, you can use TIFF files for editing in any photo editing software, or as a DNG file. That's a non-proprietary RAW file, and those can be used for maximum editing in the editor of your choice. So let's hop into PureRAW and see exactly how this works. So the interface is very, very simple. There are no sliders. You're not going to be adjusting white balance or black levels, midtones, highlights. All of that is up to you to choose which photo editor you want to use. PureRAW is simply going to prepare your files for editing in another application. So let me show you how we prepare those files. The first thing we need to do is add a file, a RAW file, to our Lightbox. The Lightbox is this gray area here. We're going to keep things simple and we're going to start with just one file. So we can do this in one of three ways. We can use File and then we can add photos to the Lightbox, or we can click this, add photos to the Lightbox, or we can click this plus sign and add photos to the Lightbox, or we can just drag files in, and that's what we're going to do. So in your workshop files, we have a folder called DxO PureRAW, and we're going to grab this one right here that says goldies.cr2. That's a Canon RAW file, and I'm going to drag that into PureRAW, and now we have one image in our Lightbox. The first thing I want to show you is how powerful the PureRAW processing is. And so this Goldies image, if I double click on that, if you double click on the thumbnail, you can get a preview of the image itself. And so what we're going to do is take a look at this at full resolution, 100%, and you can see that we have a massive amount of noise in the building, in the sign, and on just everywhere. It's an unusable image. And so we need to process that. By the way, let me just explain this little part of the interface. In the Lightbox, if you want to take a look at an image, double click that, and then you can see the name of the image, when it was shot, how large it is, ISO level, all the EXIF data is right here. You can zoom in on it, you can zoom out, you can zoom in to 200% or these preset zoom levels, 300%, to really see what's going on in your image, and you can see this is noisy. And then we're going to just go back here to 200% and then fit. And then later we're going to be able to see the before and after. So we'll see these a lot. I'm going to close this for now. Let's talk about processing these images. We can do one of two things here. We can right click and choose to process this file. Later we can export this to an application, display where the file is on our Finder or in our File Explorer, or we can just remove the photo. We can process the file by right-clicking and choosing Process File here, or we can click this Process Now. Later, when we have a batch of photos, you'll understand why we have two different things. So let's just go down here and click Process Now. This interface is so simple. We have four choices for the way we want to process our files. High quality and prime are legacy settings. And so if you have a computer that has a very slow processor, slow graphics processor, you might still see these. By default, the new version, we only see Deep Prime and Deep Prime XD. High quality is great for processing most images. Prime is even better because what Prime does is it goes in and it looks at your image and it figures out what's noise and what isn't noise. It's intelligent enough to know that. Deep Prime is when DxO introduced machine learning, artificial intelligence, by scanning tens of thousands of photos and running them through artificial intelligence. Now Deep Prime uses those algorithms and that learning to figure out where noise is and where noise isn't. And then Deep Prime XD is just the next step. Deep Prime XD is what you should choose if it's available to you if you have a pretty fast machine. So those are those choices. I would stick with either one of these. Depending on which one you choose, the processing time is going to increase. So this image will take about 30 seconds using the artificial intelligence in Deep Prime XD. It's worth it, and I'll show you why. The next thing you're going to choose is which optical corrections you want to make. These are things that are introduced into an image because of the lens. Maybe it's not a good lens, it has some artifacts, it's got some scratches, something is wrong with it. And so we can correct those things. The way that those are corrected are with something called DxO modules. And as we progress through this, you're going to see that we might need to download a DxO module. It's included in PureRAW. But what those are is DxO has compared lenses and camera bodies. So they'll take a camera and they'll just go through every single lens available for that camera body and profile that sensor and that lens, and that is included in those modules so it can intelligently correct things like distortion and vignetting and sharpness and the things that we want to correct. And we can go in and choose which of those things to apply. By default, you should leave all of those on. Lens softness, this corrects any kind of softening from the middle to the edge of your photo. You can choose standard, which is what I recommend. If you don't like to have a lot of sharpening, you can choose soft. You can have more sharpening by going strong or hard to have the most amount of sharpening. I recommend you start with standard and then you can experiment to see what works best for you. Vignetting solves any of the darkness that's to the edge of your lens. Chromatic aberration corrects any kind of problems with the colors coming through your lens. If you have any kind of fringes around the edges of things, that's chromatic aberration. That can be corrected. And then lens distortion, if you have a wide angle or a pin cushion kind of a lens, we're going to see that that is fixed. When those things are fixed, specifically lens distortion, what will happen is the image is going to be warped so that it is flat. And when that happens, you'll have the edges that are sort of bowed. So the image needs to be cropped. And so by default, we can crop our image to the original ratio. That's what I recommend. Maximum rectangle is going to go to the very edge as far as it can without introducing any of the curved, it's called bleed. We don't want to see any of that. So the aspect ratio might change just a little bit. But if you want to crop yourself and determine, you can say complete area, and then what you'll see is where the image has been warped for correction, there'll be black areas, and so you'll need to crop that. So by default, image crop to original ratio is probably what you'll use 99% of the time, and that's what we're going to do. We have three ways to output our raw files. We can output them as a DNG file if we are going to take those into something like Adobe Camera Raw or Photoshop or Lightroom or Photolab. That is a non-proprietary raw file, so it's got all the benefits of the correction that's been applied with the maximum ability for us to edit later. We have JPEG file, so you can export as a JPEG and it's just ready to go, or TIFF files, and these are great if you want to jump to a specific application like analog effects or silver effects and you don't need a DNG file. We're going to do DNG and TIFF exports to show you the benefits of both of those. And then the destination is where you're saving this new file. By default, it's going to be in the same folder with a new folder called DxO, but you can change that. You can also add custom file renaming if you want to. These, I think, are pretty self-explanatory. And then the last thing you're going to see here is this magical thing here, which is export. And so as soon as PureRAW is finished processing your file, you can send it to the application of your choice. And so let me show you what's available. We have here, don't export after processing. So if you just want it to do nothing, or Lightroom, Lightroom Classic, Photoshop, etc. If there's an application that you'd like to send your file to and you don't see it, you can click Select Software, then navigate to the folder in your Applications folder, and then choose. So I've already chosen all of these, but if one of these didn't show up, I could just navigate and say Add Perspective or Add Analog Effects or Add Photolab or whatever software. So for now, what we're going to choose is we are going to choose Photoshop 2023, and we're going to export a DNG file. This is the first workflow that I'd like to show you. We're going to process the image, and then we're going to bring it into Photoshop, into Adobe Camera Raw, to correct white balance and see what's happening. So I'm going to say Start Processing. Now the cool thing is all of the things that I just showed you, they don't change. So all of the other workflows that we're going to look at, saving TIFF files, sending it to the NIC collection, going into Lightroom, all of those settings stay exactly the same, and so we don't even have to revisit those. We're just going to look a little bit more at the interface. The image has been loaded here into Photoshop. Now I can edit this as I would any other raw file. I can change my white balance here, and we can see that this is really cool. Let's go into 100%, and remember all that nasty noise that we had? It's just gone. It is absolutely gone. We're able to fix our white balance. We can do anything in Adobe Camera Raw, and then open this in Photoshop and begin editing this image. Now, one of the things I want to show you here, I'm going to go back over into PureRAW. Once the processing is done, we can see the results. So I want to show you this. This is quite spectacular. So we're in this interface again. This is the same thing that we showed you before when we double-clicked on the image and we were able to see that. So now we can see the before and after. And I'm going to go in here to 100%. And we can look at this noise. That is amazing. Look at how much noise that we have before, after, before, after. That is the power of machine learning and artificial intelligence. I've tried to do noise reduction on this image many times before, and I've never had results like this. So I've got a sharpened image, free of lens distortion, free of chromatic aberration, free of noise, that I can then bring into Adobe Camera Raw and do whatever I want to it. It is really, really amazing. Okay, we're going to do something else here. I'm going to clear my lightbox. So I'm going to say clear lightbox up here on the left-hand side. And I'm going to click on this button to add a new RAW file. And so I'm going to go into my workshop folder. I'm going to go into PureRAW. And let's grab this one, this desi.cr2. So this is a camera RAW file from a Canon camera. And then what we want to do is say process now. And we're going to do the exact same thing, except I'm going to do deep prime, all the things we did before. This time I'm going to export this as a TIFF file, 16-bit TIFF. And I'm going to export this into NIC6 analog effects. And one thing I didn't mention, you can export with the original RAW file. This is great if you just want to keep your original RAW next to your new DNG or TIFF file for later reference. You can do that. It just keeps them in the same place in the new folder, so you know where the original RAW file came from if you want to reprocess that as a different type of file, like a TIFF or a JPEG or something else later on in the future. We're not going to do that. But I am going to open this in Analog Effects. This is fantastic if you have the NIC collection and a bunch of RAW files and you don't want to have an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription or something like that. You can just go straight from your RAW file into Analog Effects. So we're creating a TIFF file and jumping into Analog Effects, part of the NIC collection. So this is going to take a few seconds, and our image is here ready to go. So I can go in and play with my different cameras or whatever. I've got a little preset here that I made called a subtle blue. I'll click on that and look at that. We have our finished image and that looks spectacular. So that is the workflow if you want to go raw straight into any of the NIC collection. Just convert it to a TIFF file and then export it to the application of your choice. Okay, so I'm not going to save this file. I'm just going to close out Analog Effects, close without saving. And then what I want to do is I want to show you a different way to use this. So generally, when you're working with a photo shoot or a session, you're going to come home with 100 or 200 photos. You're not going to be doing one at a time necessarily, and that's where these cues come into play. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to clear my light box so we have a clean plate, and then up here on the left hand side I'm going to click File. I'm going to add all photos from folder. So I'm going to click on that, and then I know that I have in this folder here, Nick Working, this raw files folder. So I'm going to open that, and I have an entire photo shoot in that folder. It's going to start loading all of those in. The first thing we're going to see here is this pop-up that says DxO Optics modules, they're needed. The first time PureRAW experiences a new camera and lens combination, it's going to ask you to download the DxO Optics module that applies to that. In this case, it's my 1DS Mark II and my 85mm lens. And so I need to download that. If I don't, I'm not going to have all of those lens corrections and the sharpening and the vignetting. All the stuff that's been tested and calibrated in the studio won't be applied. So we want to make sure that we download that. So I'm going to click on that. I'll click Save. This is going to download. It takes a fraction of a second to download those images. And now, by default, all of my images have been selected. So anything with a blue border has been selected. And so if I said process now, it would just process all of these files all at once. I don't want to do that. I want to do something else. So I'm going to unselect all of these. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go through and choose a few files to process as TIFF files. And I want to process some other files as DNG files. So what I'll do here is I can look at each of these images by just clicking on it. At the bottom I have this little arrow I can pop up. So now I have a thumb strip, so I can sort of go through here and see what I'm dealing with. And once I see an image I like, I can click on that and it will be selected, or I can go back here and just zip through and see things that I like. And if I find something, I can click on that and say select. So this one I like, so what I'm going to do is I will select that, click. Okay, so let's just do 3 files. I'll click on that. And then I'm going to add that to a queue. So this queue is saying, how do you want to process these images? So these images, I want them to be processed as DNG files in this subfolder, and I don't want to export them to anything. So what I'll do here is I will choose nothing, export to nothing, no exporting. And then I'm going to add them to a queue. As soon as I do that, you're going to see down here this bar, and it says show queue, processing is paused. So when you add a new queue, the processing is paused by default. You have to click go, which is right here. And then we have cancel all batches. So let's do some different processing. In fact, I think these same images are pretty good. I'm going to add those to a new queue, but this time I'm going to save those as a TIFF file, and then after I'm done, I'm going to open those in Photoshop, and I'm going to add those to a queue. So now if I click show queue, you'll see I have batch number 1 with 3 images, and I'm creating DNG files. Batch number 2, I've got 3 images and I'm creating TIFF files. And you can do this as many different ways as you want with as many different files as you want. So you might want to have, if you're at a wedding, you would batch process, here's all the stuff that was before the wedding and custom name that. Here's the wedding itself. Here's all the bridal stuff. Here's the reception. You get the idea. You can use this to process all your images and get them ready for intelligently processing them at a later time. Now that we have everything ready to go, we need to start our queue. So there's this little button right here that says play. I'm going to click on that, and then this is going to start processing. And then when it's finished, we'll get a nice dialog that says it's all done. Now that we understand how PureRAW works as a standalone application, let me show you what happens if you use this in Lightroom Classic, because you get some bonus features. So let me show you exactly what I mean by that. So the bonus features are if you have an image like this. So if I go into my develop module, you will see that I have processed this already. So I've set my white balance and exposure and all of these different things, but the sharpening and the noise reduction was done by Lightroom itself. And if I look up in the clouds, I can see there's just a lot of noise here. There's some problems. It's not quite as sharp as I would like this to be. And I wish that I would have process this with PureRAW before I went into Lightroom, but because we have a Lightroom plugin, I can do it afterwards. It's really cool, and I can keep all of those adjustments. So what I'm going to do here is going to go up to File, and then we are going to go to Plugin Extras, and then Process with DxO PureRAW. When I click on that, what will happen is the raw file is going to be sent to PureRAW, and now I have all of the same choices that I had before. So I'm going to say Deep Prime. I want all the things applied, and I'm going to make sure that I am doing a DNG file. I think that is the best choice for this because I'm going to be going back into Lightroom Classic. And then export to, I'm not going to export it to anything because I'm initiating this from Lightroom, and then I can say start processing. What's going to happen is now that raw file is going to go to DxO PureRAW. It's going to be processed. All of the good corrections are going to be made, the noise reduction, and then it's going to come back into Lightroom, and then all of my adjustments will be applied. And so it will be just as if I started with DxO PureRAW, even though I already processed this image a few years ago. It's all done, and now I can take a look at this. If we look at this at full resolution, all of that noise is gone. You can see this angel on the hilltop is nice and sharp. All the detail in the city here is all amazing. All of the noise that I had there is absolutely wiped out. I absolutely love it. And so if we go to the develop module, you can see that all of my adjustments are still there. So this is exactly as if I had started with PureRAW and then went into Lightroom, but it's just a bonus because we can go back in time and process this and apply it and get the benefits. It's really an amazing thing. Okay, now that we have done that, you've seen that DxO PureRAW can be used as a standalone application. You can batch process photos. You can export them in 3 different ways: JPEG, TIFF, and a DNG file. You can choose the application of your choice for processing those files. You can go directly to the file of your choice as an export, or you can use this as a plug-in to Lightroom Classic. This is a very, very powerful tool, and I think it'll make a great addition to the Nick collection. Well, this wraps up our final piece of software and this tutorial. I thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see how you use all of these tools and applications to better your workflow and come up with some fantastic images.